Okay, we just thought it'd be an interesting idea to talk to you a little bit about the work that we've been doing with Bank Street, and how Bank Street brought powerful interactions to us, and also really helped move, or at least try to help move our culture into a reflective culture by using reflective supervision.
Great.
So can you talk a little bit about the I Notice statements you've been using in the home-based program?
Sure. So my role is a little bit different, and my participation in the project with Bank Street has been a little different because I supervise our home visiting program. But what that means, I think, is that for me, that reflective supervision is especially important. And it's really important for teachers, obviously, but for the in-home educators, I think, in some ways it's even more important because they are out there in the field in families' homes really independently, and they have to be really independent in their work, and only rarely do I actually get to see them doing their work. And so for me as a supervisor, it's really great to have that reflective supervision process and that tool to help them through some of those challenging situations that they run into when they're out there working with families every day. And so we've tried to incorporate a couple of different elements of reflective supervision into the program, and definitely the I Notice statements have been a really important part of that. So we have started using those statements, I have started using those statements with my staff, the 5 in-home educators, and then also with families and children when they come to our group socializations that we have twice a month.
Okay.
So when I do have opportunities to observe the staff interacting with families and then also the parents interacting with their children, I try to be intentional about looking for things to notice in those interactions, and looking for things positive things that I can really pull out and highlight that happen at those events, whether that's something that a staff person does or it's something that a parent does.
And so with your staff, when you're doing the I Notice statements with your staff, what have they said? Has there been any feedback? Have you noticed that they enjoy it? They feel nervous about it?
The feedback so far from the staff has been really positive.
Okay.
They have definitely appreciated the positive comments, and I've sort of done it in a couple of different ways. I've sent out several group emails where I had an I Notice statement in the email about each person, and so that was a more public recognition of things that they had done well, or things that we were that they were proud of that week, or that I had noticed that they had done well. And then I've also privately, in my supervision conversations and through email as well, more one-on-one, have given them more individual feedback using that I Notice It Matters format. There's one staff member in particular who I think it's made a really big difference with. She and I have had a challenging relationship in the 2.5 years that I've been her supervisor.
Okay.
It's not always been easy. We've had some conflicts about some viewpoints that we have that are really different about the work and our roles, and how I can best support her. And she, in particular, has responded incredibly well to those I Notice statements.
Okay.
And I think that it almost was like a reset button for us. Like, it almost has allowed us to shift that relationship a little bit to where, because we were having some conflicts and some disagreements, I probably wasn't doing the best I could, or I wasn't noticing her accomplishments as often as I could have.
Right.
And so that was kind of perpetuating that negative cycle where she didn't feel appreciated, and I didn't feel like appreciating her because I was feeling frustrated.
Right.
And so by my decision to be more intentional about noticing her good work that she really does do,
right,
and really pointing that out and talking about why that work matters, I think it allowed us to kind of shift to a more positive cycle of interaction.
Okay.
And it's not perfect, but definitely better over the last few months than it had been previously.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I know that you are not new to reflective supervision. You know, you've experienced it as a supervisee, right? And so after the training that we did with Bank Street when we were all working together, I think it was the spring of last year, is there anything that you took away from that kind of influenced your practice specifically with supervision?
Yeah, I think there's two things
Uh-huh.
specifically. The first was that it's just, even though I had some experience with reflective supervision in the past, it was a really good reminder to me of how important it is, and it was a really good reminder of the need to differentiate between reflective and administrative supervision.
Uh-huh.
So I have always had the intention, and I've always had the desire to be a really reflective supervisor, but it's can be challenging as a supervisor when you do have administrative tasks that you need to make sure people have their data in the computer, you need to make sure that their attendance is on track, you need to make sure that all those things are happening that, you know, are your responsibility as a supervisor. And so just for me I think it was important to be reminded and to recommit to that idea that both of those things are important, but you have to be intentional about when are you doing one and when are you doing the other, and not trying to do them at the same time,
right.
Not trying to mix them together, which I think is what I had sort of fallen into in the past. And then the other thing that I think the training was really helpful for was reminding me about that idea of parallel process and talking to my staff about how that process of reflection can be used with their families as well. And so almost that like meta conversation about like, okay, we're reflecting now. How did that feel for you? So like reflecting with them on the process of that reflective supervision, and then talking to them about how could they help families be more reflective? How can they use reflective questions? How can they use this type of strategy that they just experienced when they're working with parents as well?
Right. Okay. So and now it takes me nicely to my next question about, have you noticed any the trickle down, the parallel process, like any of your in-home educators using, or has it influenced their work? You know,
I think it has. And I'd be curious to hear from them. You know, how they would describe it. But there's definitely a couple examples that I can think of. You know, one of my in-home educators works closely and has worked with for about 3 years now. They have a really strong relationship, but with one of the moms in the program who is in an abusive relationship that she continually goes back to and has left and goes back and left and goes back. And during one of my recent supervision conversations with that in-home educator, she was just feeling so frustrated about this mom's pattern and how she felt like she wanted to be supportive of this mom leaving the relationship and being more independent, but didn't know how to do that and was feeling upset and frustrated because she saw this recurring pattern. And so we had some reflective conversation about that and what her role was with that family. But then we also talked about how she could use reflective questions to help that mom think about her relationship in some different ways. And so that's just one example. But I think that it has encouraged them, or you know, that my intention has been to encourage them to use some of those strategies and some of that type of questioning with families as well. And I think they've started to do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.